Hello everyone, welcome to another glass blowing video. I am Sim and this is the Fusing Shop. And in today's video we are going to be making what's called an air trap implosion marble. So let's get started. The first thing I'm doing here is heating up some 20mm solid rod. Excuse me. And this rod you want to heat up gradually and slowly. So I start with a nice bushy annealing flame. And then gradually bring that glass down and down closer to the working flame and turn up your oxygen and start getting some heat into that glass. But it's very important that since it's thicker glass that you heat it up nice and slowly, because if you try to heat this too quickly in the flame, it will crack. Now I'm just taking off some excess glass on the end that has some air bubbles in it. And always keep a little bucket of water around so you can throw hot glass in it. This way you won't accidentally get burnt. So boom, just throw it in the bucket and it makes a really cool sound when you throw it in that water. So now we're going to go ahead and make a gather, which is the way we start any kind of marble, or most marbles anyway. So we're going to go elbows down position with the glass, which means the glass is angled down. This is a perfect angle right here, how you can see how the glass is angled down. And I'm just keeping the tip of that rod in the flame. And as you do that, your glass will start to ball up on the end. And that's exactly what we wanted to do to make a nice round ball on the end. Now I'm going to press it down on my graphite paddle. That's called making a Maria. And just do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button while you're here. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And now we have a Maria on the end of our rod. Now we're going to put some heat onto the flat part of that Maria. And we're going to press it down onto what's called a floral frog, which is right there. And you don't have to be crazy beast with this. Just use some gentle pressure. And it makes a whole bunch of little like pinhole dots in your glass, which is really cool. Now I'm just seeing if that glass is hot, and it's not, so we're good to start putting some color over where the pins made those impressions on the glass. So I'm just peeling off a little bit of glass from the end. It's a little bit thicker than I wanted it to be. And now I'm just going to go ahead and use that color and go over everywhere where there's a little indent in the glass. So there's a whole bunch of them, so this is going to take me a little bit. And you want to be really careful with your spacing at this point. You don't want to put too much color. You don't want the color to overlap and to blob together. So you have to have a little bit of accuracy when you do this part of this project. So just be careful, take your time. Try to make smaller dots rather than larger ones. It makes it easier with the spacing. So rather than having a huge big blob in one spot, it's nicer to make like little tiny dots. So just go around, and I'm sharpening up the end of my color rod on my L Marver. It was starting to droop down a little bit, and it's always easier for me when it's straight. So just continue around and drop a little dot of color on every little indent. And I guess you don't have to do every one, but I think it looks cool. And it makes a cool pattern if you do. So keep your glass close to the flame. Also, these are all going to be cold seals, so you don't want to crack your glass as you're doing this. So keep your piece close to the flame and make sure it has a little bit of heat in it. This way those dots don't pop off and you don't accidentally crack your piece as you're doing this. It's sometimes a good idea to flash it in like a nice soft flame just to make sure the project stays hot. Again, the most common cause for cracking is when you shock the glass. So if it gets too cool and the temperature of the hot glass drops too low, then it will crack. Or if you touch hot glass to cold glass, again, it'll crack. So just go ahead and take your time, put your dots down, and try to keep that your Maria nice and warm. because again, you don't want those nice dots that you're laying down to pop off. And keep in mind, this does take practice to get. So if this is your first time laying down dots, maybe lay down a dot not in every single little indent, just in like a few, just to you can see how many dots that are laid down right there. But just do a few, just to get a feel for how much glass you need to add to your Maria to cover that indent without plugging it with the glass. Because if you use a stringer that's too thin, you'll wind up just filling in that hole rather than kind of like covering it up, because you want to trap that air bubble inside the glass. So you want to cover it up without smushing your glass too far into the indent. So just some things to keep in mind. And right now, I'm just going to be working on melting that glass in and condensing those dots and starting to implode them. So I usually like to go with the elbows up, which is having the glass either at neutral like it is right now, which is parallel to your workbench, or, and of course it's always good to switch hands when one hand gets tired if you're doing rotation by hand. And it's also good practice that you learn to rotate with two hands. So this is good practice for, just giving your, well, in this case, my right hand a break. And since I'm a righty, I naturally just do things better with my right hand. So it's always good to practice with your non-dominant hand and get good at rotating with both of them. So this is just a cool way of doing that. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't look so good or your implosion is not coming out center, you could just switch back to the other hand and fix it up. So what was I saying now? Oh, right, about elbows up position. So elbows up is exactly what you see me doing now, where the glass is angled with the hot side downward, and pretty much gravity is pulling that glass down and helping that implosion along. So I switch between elbows up and a neutral position when I do an implosion. This way, when I go elbows up, the implosion happens a little bit quicker. And I use my neutral position to help round off the end and keep things nice and on center. And just love that angle. The glass looks like a lightsaber in my hand right now. It's so cool how glass just makes the light travel like that. So just go ahead and keep heating and rotating. Most of the rest of this video is going to be me just condensing that design and letting the marble, letting those dots start to implode. When it gets very hot at the tip, I like to just press it back into a Maria a little bit with my graphite, and that also helps the dots implode more. So when it starts to kind of get droopy, that's when I'll just touch it with a paddle. And this, it's good to be gentle rather than too rough, because if you smash this too hard, you're going to ruin the artwork. So just be gentle. It's always better when you're dealing with glass to be gentle as opposed to trying to be a beast with the glass, which never works out in your favor. So again, we're back to the neutral position now and just rotating it, trying to keep everything on center in the flame. And just remember to keep the very tip of this in the flame. And then you just keep rotate. And that's what the implode, you can see the dots are starting to implode, which is exactly what we want. And it's looking good. Awesome. So at this time, I kindly ask for you guys to leave me some comments on what you think of this video. It always helps me to figure out what, how my videos are doing. I did change the angle of my GoPro for this video. So hopefully that is giving a better view of what's going on. And also just helps me to know what you guys want to see. So hit me with some comments. I might be giving away some of the stuff that I actually make in these videos. I'm not sure how I'm going to work it out yet. Excuse me. But mostly they just sit around. So I think it'd be fun to to give away some of the pieces that I make in these videos. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comment below. Okay, now back to the glass. So I'm pretty much doing the same thing. I am just rotating, letting that glass hang down, rounding it out, kind of letting it droop down a little bit, and then flattening it on the paddle. So, and you can keep repeating this for as long as you want your implosion to implode for. So if you really want to make it look like a giant firework, then just keep doing this process. If you're interested in learning how to work with glass and flame working, and you are in the New York, New Jersey area, I do offer sessions for people to come by and try to melt some glass. If this is something you'd like to do, then hit me up with an email at yourock@thefusingshop.com. That's YOUROCK @thefusingshop.com. There's a link to our website in the description box below, so check that out as well. You can see a bunch of pictures, and I'm going to be posting some of my students' work on there soon, so you can see what people have been making for their first time blowing glass. So again, it's thefusingshop.com, or you could email at yourock@thefusingshop.com. Here we're just using the paddle again to gently press that glass more into the middle, and then back to rotating. So I'm sorry, this is just a process, and it's taking a little bit longer than I expected. I should have probably made a smaller marble for this video. Again, the bigger the rod you use, the bigger the piece that you're going to make. So the more heat it takes and the longer time it takes to make. So just keep those things in mind as you are planning your project and how much time you have to make it. So now looks like I'm getting ready to start rounding off one end. And to do that, all you need to do is keep a neutral position in the flame and just keep rotating the glass. Check how it looks. Now we're going to go into the marble mold. So a couple tips when you're using the marble mold. Number one is you always want to be turning the glass. Even when you take the glass out of the flame, it is starting to cool down. But just remember that it also, gravity is constantly pulling that glass down. So make sure that you continue to rotate it even when you take it out of the flame. And before you go into your marble mold, make sure that the marble cools down for a few seconds. Because if you go in the marble mold too hot, it's going to, first of all, deform your marble because the glass will start to droop down. And then you're going to have to go back in and start reworking it. So just be patient, give that glass a couple seconds to cool down and develop like a little bit of a skin before you go into the marble mold. And again, always make sure you're rotating. Right now, I'm getting ready to cold seal punty to remove the marble off that rod. So I like to make sure my punties are nice and pointy. This way they leave as little glass as possible when I go to break them off later. And you want to make sure it's relatively centered up, and it'll make rounding out the second side of this much easier on you. Here we're going to do a flame cut. To do a flame cut, you just keep your glass in the flame in the same spot and rotate, and that glass will start to get nice and hot and melty. And when the glass starts to get red and it becomes molten, you could gently pull your hands apart, and you want to keep your glass in the flame until it cuts into two separate pieces. If you flame cut too fast, you can make what's called a stringer, and these stringers are like very thin pieces of glass, and they are very dangerous to have around your shop. So make sure that you always flame cut in the flame and do not remove the glass from the flame until the glass has fully cut. So just a safety tip that is critical when you work with glass. You do not want to have stringers all over the place. They're hard to see and easy to poke yourself with. So here we go. Now we're just rounding off the second half of the marble. And it's the same thing we did on the first side. We melted in that extra glass and melted that down into the rest of the piece. And now, excuse me. And now just go ahead and rounding it in the marble mold again. making sure we keep rotating when it comes out of the flame, and we rotate when we go into the mold. Another tip for using the marble mold is there's a couple different ways of rounding the marble. I'm holding the mold in my hand and rotating it up 90 degrees as I rotate the marble to get it rounded off. Some people keep it on their workbench and use two hands to drop the marble in the mold and then round it. It's really your preference, whatever you're comfortable doing. I like to pick the mold up and hold it. But if you're more comfortable doing on your workbench, again, there's many different ways of doing the same task. Right now, I'm getting ready to punty up to the other side to do my final shaping. So I'm attached. I have two cold seals here now, so you have to be careful when you crack them off that the right one cracks off. And in this case, the wrong one cracked off. So what you go in is reheat, reattach, rotate, keep it on center, and then try to crack off the right cold seal when you do this. My marble did flop down a little bit, so just using the tweezers to get it back on center. And I'm just putting a little bit of heat into the rod and then just putting it where I need it to go. Things aren't always going to go your way, so take your time to learn how to fix it when it doesn't. It's just a very important skill to learn, know how to fix your mistakes. Because again, the glass, some days it works with you and some days it does not. So if you see a project is not coming out the way that you want, take a break, reassess what's happening and what you think is going wrong. At this point of the video, I'm just going to be working on rounding off this marble. So feel free to skip to the end where I do show what the final product looks like. Or if you want to watch me continue to round this off, by all means, stick around. It's always cool watching that hot glass in the flame. So I will not be offended if you go ahead and skip to the end either. Here I'm using the elbows down position and just putting some heat into the only one half of this marble, the half that I'm trying to work on. You never want to heat up the whole mass at the same time. You only want to work on one half of the marble. Back into the mold. Another tip about using the marble mold is you always want to use a mold that the marble is bigger than the mold you're using. And this way it rides on the edge of the mold. You don't want to smash the marble in the mold when you round it. You just let it ride on the edge of the mold. There my daughter has bringing me my mail, which I kindly asked her not to put it right next to the, right where I was working. I don't need to set my mail on fire. So yeah, just working on the final rounding and we're almost done with this piece. Here I'm going to crack off the cold seal punty. Just give it a tap with your tweezer and it'll pop off nice and clean. And just going to go ahead and fire polish where that scar mark. Every time you pop off a cold seal, there's always a little bit of a scar that the rod leaves behind and a little bit of extra glass. And you do want to fire polish that out because you will see that very clearly in your finished piece. So take the time, take a couple seconds, and make sure you fire polish that out. This is what the finished product looked like in the mold. And here is what it looks like after it was annealed. So you can see those cool bubbles that have been trapped in the glass. I love the way the bottom looks on this. I used Black Lightning. I think it is North Star glass. And here's a pendant I made with the same technique. And I thought this came out really gorgeous. Those bubbles just look nice and defined in the glass. Thanks for watching. Why don't you stick around for another glass blowing video?